What if the story of Appalachia, a region known for its rugged mountains, coal mining towns, folk traditions, and deep-rooted Americana, held a genetic origin far more complex and surprising than folklore suggests? A stunning new genetic study reveals that the people of the Appalachian Mountains are shaped by a rich mosaic of ancestry, woven from ancient indigenous roots, early European settlers, African lineages, and unexpected global influences. This research challenges long-held assumptions and paints a vivid portrait of a region whose identity runs deeper than surface stereotypes. Let's explore the surprising genetic legacy of Appalachia, uncovering the genetic puzzle of Appalachia. For generations, Appalachia has evoked images of tight-knit communities, mountain traditions, and isolation. But beneath the surface of cultural continuity lies a genetic history far richer and more complex than many realize. Recent studies have begun to piece together the intricate ancestry of people living in the Appalachian region, using modern DNA analysis to uncover centuries of interwoven migrations, survival, and adaptation. Geneticists studying populations across eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, and southwestern Virginia found that the Appalachian gene pool is surprisingly diverse. While the region has historically been portrayed as homogeneous and insular, the DNA tells a different story, one of fusion between European settlers, Native American tribes, and African lineages. Some genetic markers even show traces of Mediterranean and Middle Eastern ancestry, likely linked to early colonial migration routes. One striking discovery is the significant presence of Scots, Irish, and German genetic markers. These match historical accounts of migration from Ulster and continental Europe during the 18th and 19th centuries. These settlers intermarried with indigenous peoples and enslaved Africans, whose descendants remain in the region today. This unfolding genetic narrative contradicts outdated stereotypes and gives Appalachian communities new ways to connect with their past. It also raises fresh questions about identity. How much do we really know about where we come from? For many living in Appalachia, the DNA reveals a history not just of struggle, but of resilience and interconnectedness. The puzzle is far from complete, but every genetic clue adds depth to a region whose story continues to evolve, challenging assumptions and inviting deeper curiosity about the real roots of Appalachia. Want to know what your DNA might reveal about America's hidden histories? Subscribe now and uncover the stories written in your genes. The hidden ancestry of Appalachian communities. For decades, the origins of Appalachian communities have been cloaked in myth, assumption, and selective memory. But the latest findings from genetic researchers reveal that many families in the region descend from a much broader and more global set of ancestors than traditionally acknowledged. One of the most overlooked aspects of Appalachian ancestry is the role of Native American genetics. Though often minimized in local histories, DNA analysis reveals that many people in Appalachia carry genetic markers linked to southeastern tribes, including the Cherokee, Shawnee, and Creek. These connections point to early intermarriage and cultural exchange, particularly during the colonial frontier era. African ancestry also plays a larger role than previously reported. While slavery was less widespread in mountainous areas than in the plantation-dominated Deep South, free African Americans and formerly enslaved individuals did settle and integrate into Appalachian communities. Their descendants contributed to the musical, agricultural, and spiritual traditions that shaped Appalachian culture. Another intriguing element is the appearance of Melungeon ancestry, people of mixed European, African, and Native American descent who lived in remote Appalachian areas as early as the 1700s. Long shrouded in secrecy or stigma, this group's existence is now backed by genetic evidence and recognized as part of the region's heritage. These findings highlight how racial and ethnic categories never fully captured the lived experiences of Appalachian families. They also disrupt simplistic narratives of isolation by showing a region shaped by movement, interconnection, and adaptation. The hidden ancestry of Appalachia reveals that identity in these hills has always been more layered than meets the eye. DNA is helping illuminate those layers and empowering descendants to embrace a history that's as complex as it is uniquely American. How DNA testing changed what we thought we knew. Before the rise of direct-to-consumer DNA testing, Appalachian identity was largely shaped by oral history, folklore, and genealogical records that often excluded marginalized stories. But over the last 2 decades, affordable DNA testing kits have revolutionized how people understand their roots, especially in regions like Appalachia, where historical documentation is patchy or lost. Companies like 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, and Family Tree DNA have helped millions of Americans trace their ancestry with surprising precision. In Appalachia, test results frequently reveal unexpected admixture, including African, Indigenous, Middle Eastern, and Southern European ancestry. These revelations challenge the old assumptions of a purely Scots-Irish or Anglo-Saxon heritage that has long dominated local lore and media portrayals. For many Appalachian families, these results have prompted both curiosity and reckoning. Some individuals who grew up believing they had no non-European heritage now find themselves connected to broader global lineages. Others have used DNA matches to locate lost relatives or confirm long-whispered family secrets. In particular, the rediscovery of Melungeon ancestry through genetic testing has led to a cultural revival and reclamation of identity for many in Tennessee, Virginia, and Kentucky. Beyond individual discoveries, academic researchers have leveraged anonymized genetic data to map population patterns and migrations across the Appalachian region. Their findings reveal that, despite geographic remoteness, Appalachian communities share a high degree of genetic variation, far more than one would expect from isolated populations. DNA testing has not only altered personal narratives, but also reshaped the collective understanding of Appalachian history. It has given scientific backing to marginalized stories, challenged racial myths, and redefined what it means to belong in Appalachia. What we once thought we knew is now evolving, with each DNA test opening a new chapter in this region's rich and surprising story. A melting pot, European, African, and indigenous roots. The Appalachian region may be geographically remote, but its genetic story is anything but isolated. DNA studies have confirmed that Appalachia is a remarkable melting pot of European, African, and indigenous ancestry, a living reflection of early American migrations, forced displacements, and cultural intersections. European settlers, particularly of Scots, Irish, and German descent, began arriving in the 1700s, bringing their languages, farming techniques, and Protestant traditions. Many sought refuge from religious and political conflict and were drawn to the mountains for the promise of freedom. They weren't alone. French Huguenots, Welsh miners, and English pioneers all left a genetic imprint, contributing to Appalachia's distinctly diverse European roots. But the European narrative only tells part of the story. Indigenous groups such as the Cherokee, Shawnee, and Yuchi lived in the region for thousands of years before colonization. Despite forced removals like the Trail of Tears, intermarriage and cultural exchange with settlers left a lasting genetic presence that still appears in many family lines today. For centuries, however, this indigenous contribution was downplayed or forgotten until modern genetic testing began to restore its rightful place in Appalachian heritage. African Americans, both enslaved and free, also played a key role in shaping the region's identity. While slavery was less institutionalized in Appalachia than in the Deep South, it still existed, especially in the southern parts of Kentucky and Western Virginia. After emancipation, Black families settled across the region, many becoming miners, farmers, and musicians. Their DNA, culture, and resilience are deeply woven into Appalachia's genetic makeup. Together, these groups created an enduring tapestry of ancestry. The genetic evidence doesn't just trace roots, it tells the story of a place formed by blending, survival, and shared humanity across centuries of American history. What makes Appalachian genetics unique? Appalachian genetics stand out not just because of the mix of ancestral backgrounds, but because of how those lineages were preserved and shaped by geography, culture, and isolation. This distinct combination has produced a unique genetic profile, one that fascinates scientists and genealogists alike. Due to the region's mountainous terrain and rural development, many Appalachian families remained in the same counties for generations. This limited migration led to what's known as a founder effect, where certain genetic traits become amplified in a population over time. In Appalachia, this has led to higher than average frequencies of rare genetic markers and inherited conditions, making the region important for medical research into hereditary diseases. But isolation also had an unexpected benefit. It preserved lineages that might have been diluted elsewhere. DNA evidence shows remarkably clear traces of Scots-Irish, German, and indigenous ancestry, even centuries after initial settlement. This clarity helps researchers better understand how these groups interacted and intermarried over time. Appalachian populations also show a surprising level of genetic diversity for such a small geographic area. While some communities are genetically close-knit, others reflect centuries of migration, trade, and cultural exchange. The result is a gene pool that is both concentrated and surprisingly complex. Another unique factor is the cultural reticence around discussing race and mixed ancestry. Many families with indigenous or African roots were taught to hide or downplay that part of their background. DNA testing is now bringing those histories back into the light, allowing people to reclaim identities once pushed to the margins. Ultimately, what makes Appalachian genetics unique is how they preserve both the diversity and contradictions of American history. They tell a story that is deeply specific, yet broadly reflective of the nation's ongoing experiment in identity, movement, and memory. Why these findings matter for American history? The genetic revelations emerging from Appalachia aren't just regional curiosities. They are reshaping how we understand American history itself. For too long, the national narrative has centered on a linear and often sanitized version of ancestry. Appalachia's DNA tells a far messier, richer, and more accurate story, one that challenges myths and fills critical gaps in our historical memory. First, the findings debunk the long-held belief that Appalachian people are genetically pure descendants of early European settlers. This myth has fueled stereotypes and even exclusionary ideologies. The truth, now backed by science, is that Appalachia has always been multiracial and multicultural, shaped by a confluence of migrations, trade, and human resilience. Second, the evidence of hidden African and indigenous ancestry forces a re-examination of how race and identity were constructed in American society. It reveals how legal systems, social norms, and even family histories suppressed or erased certain heritages. In Appalachia, many people are now discovering parts of themselves that have been buried for generations, prompting both personal and cultural reckonings. These findings also highlight the power of genetic data to uncover stories that written records have lost. Many early Appalachian settlers were illiterate, and record-keeping was inconsistent. DNA provides a new kind of archive, one that can verify oral histories, expose forgotten connections, and validate marginalized identities. Perhaps most importantly, Appalachia's genetic history reminds us that American identity was never simple. It was built through migration, resistance, and interconnection, not isolation. By understanding the full picture of Appalachian ancestry, we gain deeper insight into how the United States was really formed. This knowledge doesn't just add detail, it redefines what it means to be American. And in doing so, it allows Appalachian communities to reclaim a more complete and truthful narrative of their past, cultural identity, and the future of Appalachian heritage. As Appalachians uncover the full spectrum of their genetic past, many are beginning to rethink their cultural identity. For generations, Appalachian heritage was often painted with a narrow brush, usually as white, Scots-Irish, and isolated. But DNA evidence is changing that narrative and opening doors to a more inclusive understanding of who Appalachians really are. The discovery of African, indigenous, and even Mediterranean or Middle Eastern roots in some lineages is giving families new ways to connect with their ancestry. In towns where racial identity was once rigidly defined, individuals are finding new pride in a multicultural past that had long been suppressed. This shift is not just personal, it's cultural. Appalachia's folk traditions, music, cuisine, and storytelling already reflect a diverse set of influences. Now, communities are increasingly recognizing that richness as a result of blending, not homogeneity. The banjo, for example, has African roots. Appalachian herbal remedies share similarities with Cherokee practices. Even regional dialects borrow from a mix of linguistic heritages. These aren't coincidences, they're reflections of cultural fusion. What's emerging is a broader, more dynamic definition of Appalachian identity. Younger generations are embracing this change, using DNA and historical research to rediscover forgotten family stories and lost traditions. Festivals, museums, and schools across the region are starting to explore this new narrative more openly. As genetic research continues to illuminate the past, Appalachians face a crucial question. How do you honor a heritage that's more diverse and more complex than previously imagined? The answer lies in acceptance, education, and pride in the full tapestry of ancestry. By embracing all facets of their history, Appalachians can shape a future rooted in truth, inclusion, and resilience. The genetic map of Appalachia. When scientists mapped the genetic structure of the Appalachian population, they found something both expected and astonishing. Expected in that the DNA confirmed long-held beliefs about early European settlers. Astonishing in that it revealed a much more intricate network of genetic diversity than most historians or locals ever anticipated. Appalachia isn't one homogeneous region. It's a mosaic of micropopulations shaped by geography, migration routes, and cultural boundaries. Genetic clusters show strong familial continuity in places like eastern Kentucky, western North Carolina, and parts of West Virginia. These clusters often align with valleys and ridges that historically limited movement and encouraged intermarriage within communities. Yet, alongside these isolated populations are signs of surprising genetic blending. DNA markers point to African ancestry in communities that had long considered themselves monocultural. Native American heritage appears not only in oral traditions, but also in mitochondrial and Y chromosome lines that have persisted through generations. Interestingly, certain recessive traits, such as specific blood disorders or metabolic conditions, are more common in some parts of Appalachia due to what's known as the founder effect, where a small initial population carries genetic quirks that become amplified over time. Understanding these patterns is vital, not just for anthropology, but for improving regional healthcare and disease prevention. The genetic map also reflects broader historical movements. For example, Appalachian families who migrated to Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Indiana during the coal and steel booms of the 20th century brought their unique DNA signatures with them, spreading Appalachian genetic traits across the Midwest. In short, the genetic map of Appalachia isn't a single line. It's a complex web. It shows us where communities came from, how they stayed, where they went, and how much more interconnected their histories truly are than once believed. What this changes. The implications of these genetic discoveries go far beyond ancestry tests and family trees. They challenge how we understand race, heritage, and identity in the United States. Appalachia, often stereotyped as culturally uniform and isolated, now stands as a powerful example of America's diverse and blended foundations. For individuals, these revelations can be transformative. People who long believed they were 100% one thing may now discover indigenous or African ancestry. This can lead to deep personal reflection and sometimes even cultural reawakening. It invites questions about what identity truly means and whether it's shaped more by biology, family tradition, or both. At a community level, this changes how Appalachian history is taught and told. Schools and local historians are beginning to reconsider who gets included in the regional narrative. Cultural institutions may now feel compelled to honor a wider array of voices and stories, from the Cherokee to African American miners to newer immigrant groups who've shaped the region more recently. In the medical field, genetic data also shifts priorities. A better understanding of inherited conditions can improve healthcare delivery in rural Appalachian counties, where access to specialists is limited. Doctors are beginning to use this data to inform diagnoses, prevention strategies, and community health education. Finally, these findings disrupt broader American myths. They highlight how interwoven our lineages are, regardless of regional or racial labels. Appalachia becomes a mirror to the nation, diverse, messy, and human. This isn't just about science, it's about truth. And when that truth includes more people, it has the power to foster understanding, connection, and healing across historical divides. What's next? The story of Appalachian genetics is still unfolding, and what comes next will be shaped by both science and community engagement. Researchers continue to collect DNA samples, build more detailed maps, and uncover ancestral connections that further complicate our understanding of who the Appalachian people are. One major goal moving forward is increasing representation. Many DNA studies still rely heavily on participants who voluntarily test through commercial services, which can skew results towards certain demographics. Expanding research access in underserved or rural Appalachian areas will provide a more complete picture of the region's diversity. At the same time, education is key. Local schools, historical societies, and museums can help translate genetic findings into meaningful narratives. When paired with oral history, family archives, and cultural practices, DNA becomes not just a science tool, but a way to reclaim hidden heritage and amplify silenced voices. Appalachians themselves will also play a central role in shaping what happens next. How communities choose to respond to new ancestry revelations, whether through pride, curiosity, or even resistance, will affect how regional identity evolves in the decades to come. There's also growing interest in using this genetic insight to preserve endangered traditions, from Cherokee language revival to Old World folk music. Some families are even reestablishing links with long-lost relatives or tribal communities based on newfound heritage. Ultimately, the next chapter in this story belongs to the people of Appalachia. With science offering new lenses to view the past, the future becomes an opportunity not just to revisit history, but to rewrite it with a fuller, richer, and more inclusive understanding of what it means to be Appalachian. The Appalachian genetic story is a powerful reminder of how history lives within us. From ancient roots to modern revelations, the journey continues. If you found this eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Join us as we explore more untold stories hidden in the DNA of America.